Black queen, you're immaculate. It's coming that the world ain't ready for your magic yet. And that was never your fault, man. I guess they couldn't hack it yet. World dominance, black.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Black Tech Unplugged. I have another cybersecurity guest. So, Nancy, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself to my listeners? We could do something called the check-in, which is just your name, location, current role, and how many years you've been in tech.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Nancy Gariche. I'm located in Ottawa, Ontario in Canada, and I'm a senior developer advocate for the GitHub Security Lab. And I've been in tech for like close to 2 decades, 20 years almost.
Wow. I feel like you're the first one I've had in a while that's been like a 2-decade person in tech. So I'm very excited to have you. And I know you come with a breadth of knowledge. So let's jump into things. And let's start off by first talking about your career and your title now. So what is your exact role right now?
Exact role right now is senior developer advocate for the GitHub Security Lab. So basically, I work with a bunch of security researchers who look through open source projects for vulnerabilities, and they learn how to fix those vulnerabilities and use that knowledge to inform the public and products on how to secure their code. Awesome. And I work with them to basically make it more accessible. So they might be taking their research and make it accessible to everybody else, like developers, and that's the part of the advocacy that I'm doing.
Awesome. And how did you get into that role? Because I don't feel like that's not something, if you go on LinkedIn, there's 100 people for that role. So how did you get into it?
Yes, I was recruited basically, and it's now that I think about it, it's me getting involved in my community. I was doing my government job in risk management and needed a bit more excitement and got involved in my community and led different projects. And I was involved in so many nonprofit projects related to education. So basically, I felt like my hobby was dev advocacy and making sure that people knew about security and cybersecurity and application security. And so I was planning events, planning meetings, and a friend of mine who did that work said, Nancy, you know that people actually get paid to do what you do, right? I was actually planning a CTF, which is a capture the flag competition. So basically a security hackathon. And we had plenty of participants from around the world and prizes. And it was kind of a big deal without really, realizing it. And then she says, like a lot of people would, like private companies would love to have events like that and have someone to do that. And then she gave my name and, within a year, I had this new amazing job. So it just came, I didn't feel like I looked for it, but when I look back, it feels like I prepared myself for it by all these events that I was planning, but just for my own entertainment and pleasure, basically.
Yeah, and I want to get into more details in regards to how your previous experience helped you get to your current role. But before that, I want to talk about these hackathons. So capture the flag is what you called it, right? What actually happens during this hackathon or during this process?
Okay, so capture the flags are a series of challenges, basically security challenges, where you're supposed to hack into something and find. Usually, each challenge has a secret that you need to discover, and it tests you on different type of things in cybersecurity. It would be cryptography, application security, and it's a great way to learn and have fun. And it's sometimes even community as well. Great community events where you get to learn to learn different topics, but also meet people in the industry. So that's what we did. So sometimes when we wanted a topic to be known by our audience, we would create challenge around them. And that was a way for them to be curious and to know about a different technology. Very, very common in the security community.
I'll be honest, I've heard of Capture the Flag like as a childhood game, but not from the cyber security, or, like from that perspective. So interesting that translates. I like that.
Yes, because each challenge, actually, the special code I was talking about is called the flag, and then that's the solution to whatever you succeeded to hack.
Okay, interesting. And we might have someone listening to this episode and they're thinking, okay, you're talking about this application security, and you're talking about these different, like the different careers and your career, but how can someone who's interested in application security actually make that switch over into that particular sector in tech?
First of all, making sure that they're interested in application security. And I think one of the best way, I'll go directly to OWASP. OWASP is OWASP for Open Worldwide Application Security Project. And it's a nonprofit that's mainly in Europe and US, but everywhere around the world, there are chapters that you can join for free. And they have meetings depending on how active your chapter is locally. Usually it's at least once a month, or at least 4 times a year. And then they have a bunch of resources, a bunch of projects related to application security. And the most popular project within OWASP is called the OWASP Top 10, which are the 10 most common vulnerabilities in web application security. And it's not a complete list of all the vulnerabilities, but it is the top 10 as an awareness tool to let people know, what, the application that you're building, the software that you're creating can actually be vulnerable. It does great thing, but let's look at how it is vulnerable and how you can protect it. And once people start to learn about those top 10, then they get interested in deeper issue and deeper vulnerabilities. And I feel like being part of that community is the #1 way to get in and to get access to all that knowledge, because it is free, it's open, and once people get interested, they really want to share and everybody else to know. So it's also a friendly way to get to know people from the industry and who want to share.
Wonderful. And for people who are listening, can you repeat the website or the source for how to get to that particular resource?
Yes, the nonprofit is called OWASP, OWASP.org is the website. And from there, don't get overwhelmed. Just start because there are different projects. Anybody can start anything, right? It's a nonprofit, but just join find if there's a chapter close to your location, and join, visit them, meet the project leaders, the chapter leaders, and from there learn about OWASP Top 10, and then naturally you'll navigate through the organization and know what interests you more and find the resources that you need and want.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Nancy. Definitely appreciate that.
No worries.
And we were talking about your previous experience, having these communities, leading these different, I guess we'll call them like workshops or community events. And that's how you got into your current role. So go more into detail about that. What events were you having? Where were they being held? And what were people who were involved in those events actually doing?
So many things in organization, but one of them, I started this nonprofit for just before the pandemic called Secure That Cert. In cybersecurity, there's a lot of certifications, and I felt like it was really hard to stay motivated to like study for all of them, and it was very lonely. And I thought, why not have groups where we would have study groups and be accountable? Of course, there's work that you have to do deep work that you have to do on your own, but having this group to stay accountable to, and meeting weekly and to have a plan going forward would be helpful. So that's what Secure That Cert was about. So we created a CISSP, which is one of the top, I guess, or most popular cybersecurity certification, especially for management. And so that's how I met a bunch of people from my community. And from there, knowing what I did and different people that I met through there, I planned CTFs, capture the flag events. I also was the co-leader of the OWASP chapter within my city in Ottawa. So basically finding speakers and ordering pizza. It was and getting people together in a space to talk application security and geek out once a month. So those were different events that I planned. But I think that the biggest one is I was one of the co-leaders of the OWASP Desktop project. And that was a project trying to get as many beginners into tech and like demystify application security and different security topic. And we would, again, plan capture the flag events, or we had the OWASP DevSlop show, which was on YouTube, where we would interview different experts in the field and kind of ask, and talk about different topics and interview them and answer questions through live shows and live kind of podcasts. So, doing a bunch of things like that got my name out there, I guess, and got my name out there, and also helped me network with people in the industry. So that opened a lot of doors for me.
Awesome. I think it's also, I really appreciate that you share how you've put yourself out there, because I know that, sometimes people in tech, like, we do all these amazing things outside of our 9 to 5, but we don't talk about, like, creating these communities is a big deal. And so it's like, we need to recognize and also share so that other people can join the community, because we're only as big as our network.
Yes. And what I'd like to share as well is that it's a different way, because I think these days what's popular is to become an influencer and creating your brand. And that is not my thing. Like, I respect and I love some influencers and I love what they do and I respect what they do. But to put myself out there that way didn't feel natural to me, and still doesn't feel natural to me. But planning events, taking care of people, that felt more of, so I rarely put myself out there, but the event or what I was trying to get done was out there. And still, my name got into ears of the right people. So I think that it's important to know that you can put yourself out there without it being all about me, or my name or my brand, right? And just being helpful to the community and being authentic, and knowing that I get to this day, like, messages in my LinkedIn asking for advice, and knowing I saw you at that event and I saw you at this and I want to get started, and people would have a specific question and I do help out. And that's how I feel useful. And that how also I know that it's impactful, right? Like that there's a change, like seeing people that saw me speaking at an event and suddenly are saying, oh, I'm working in the industry, and asking for advice. So I've seen in the last, I would say decade, people grow into cybersecurity careers, and it's been very fulfilling.
You bring up a really great point, especially for the introverted techies out there. Like, you don't have to be a tech influencer. You don't have to be like the TikTok star. You can make impact other ways. So I really appreciate that you brought that up. But I do have to go on the flip side and ask you, if you have any tech influencers that are like your faves.
I guess a good friend of mine is Tanya Janka, and she's like the queen of application security. And we have opposite personalities, right? Like we would be together, and she's like the extroverted person that just, like is out there, and I'm introverted. And so Tanya Janka, she's actually known as She Hacks Purple on the internet, like that handle on all the platform. You'll probably find her. And she's great because she's approachable, and her content is for beginners, right? So she's approachable, and you don't feel overwhelmed, and you don't feel like it's you're not expected to know a bunch, but you can grow with her community and become an expert in that field as well, and get to know about different topics that you get interested in once you get more specific in your expertise, I guess.
Excellent. I will definitely link that in the show notes, because I think everyone should go follow her, and you after the show, of course. So definitely we'll put that in. But we've been talking about application security in general. I want to narrow down our focus and talk more about your role. So tell my audience some of your day-to-day activities or responsibilities that you have.
It's basically, like I was saying in the beginning, I work with researchers who look through open source projects and find vulnerabilities. And it's, it can be complex work for someone who has never heard about that or doesn't know anything about security. So I basically take their research and talk to them and try to create content around that is more accessible to people who code, because we're really trying to secure code bases, to secure software. So from their findings, I create blog posts, we create videos, create programs, and we work with GitHub education, for example, for people that are coming up, and creating content or making content accessible to them so that they know and are aware of application security. Because you may not know, but security is not, it has changed in the last, I would say, 5 years, but for a long time, security was not part of the base curriculum for a software engineering program, right? You had to take a special class for it, or sometimes, learn it on the job. So because of that, but there are resources out there for it. So we're trying to point people in the right direction and let them know that it exists, because it's often in my work and going to conferences, I'll be speaking with software engineers who've been working for like 10 years and have never heard about OWASP, which is the top organization for application security. And it seems to me like, how can you be a software developer and a good one and have not heard about that? It's because there's a lot more work to be done in awareness in that field. And so yeah, that's what we do.
So Nancy, technically you're a little bit of a content creator, but not the content where it's like you are doing content for yourself. It's more like content based on, that application security in this specific topic. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly it, where I don't have, I'm not putting my name on it. It's basically GitHub Security Lab. Yes, I'm the author of this blog post, but again, it's more about the mission and not about creating my personal brand and that's the way I decide to do it. As a developer advocate, some people do both. We have a great dev advocate called Rizal for GitHub, and she's been doing great for GitHub and for herself, because she puts herself out there. She creates GitHub content, but also it's her personality shining through. So I guess that's also a similar message of what I was saying earlier. There's different way to do developer relation, dev advocacy. You can have an impact differently. It doesn't have to be about you personally if you're not comfortable with that.
Yes. And let's go back to application security as a whole, because you mentioned going to conferences, talking to software developers, and sounds like the security piece for application is still growing. I'll say not everyone knows how to protect their stuff. Why do you think that's the scenario, being that, we see it every day, things are hacked or, there's just different things happen, but why do you think that we're still behind on the application security front?
Yes, I think there was a time where it was an awareness problem, where people didn't know what was possible. But now I also feel like software developers are asked, there's a lot asked of them. We need to build very, sophisticated software faster than ever. There's so many requirements, and security, your software can work without being secure and nobody will know until there's an incident. So it's often the thing that people don't, think about or focus on. And it's hard. Security is hard. Whatever they say, they're, in my advocacy, I try to talk about best practices and the simple low-hanging fruits that you can do. But when you go deep, it can get overwhelming. So to introduce these complicated, or that sometimes complicated practices into a process that's already demanding is not easy, and it's not often a technical issue, but a people and process problem more than anything. That's what I found. I found that initially it was more about knowledge, but now that we have the knowledge, is how do we integrate that knowledge into our processes and give people that knowledge so that they can do their job more securely. I think that's what it's still an issue.
Got it. Do you think that in the next couple of years, we'll see it more implement it more into our processes, because to be honest, from what I see, I don't see that on some of the, you know, teams there. When I talk to software developers as well, it's more so focused, like you said, getting the product done as fast as possible, and the rest falls to the wayside.
Yeah, well, I have no choice but to hope for the future. I can't say no, but I think I'm seeing very incredible tools with AI now coming up that are making things a lot easier, because the problem I saw, even in advocacy, is that we try to make developers security expert, and we're like, we have other things to do. We understand that it's important, but we have so many things to do. We can't spend that much time on something, and providing them with better tools, with better hints by using AI. I think that's definitely in the future, and everybody's looking at it right now. So it's the hot topic, and I am definitely, there are, you know, it's not perfect. There are some issues. AI is not the solution for everything, but it is exciting to see what seems to be possible. And because I definitely think that the solution of things getting better is as providing better tools to developers, people who are making software, without expecting them to know everything about security, without, you know, being a secure developer without being a security expert is the key, I think. But how to achieve that is still a process, and there's a lot of experimentation going on out there.
Now, what about also from the schooling perspective? Because I remember you mentioned that there aren't a lot of classes, like it's not a core part of the curriculum. So are they going to make changes there? What do you recommend for people who are in school and they want to actually learn about this topic?
Yeah, you kind of have to be a self-starter. I do believe that there are better programs right now that security tends to, if you go to some universities, they'll have a course, but sometimes it's not mandatory. And what's popular these days is boot camps, right? And in boot camps, it's often not at all in the curriculum. So that's definitely a challenge. So you kind of have to be a self-starter, look up the information that you need, and because there are resources out there and that are free to help you understand, but there's nobody holding your hand to go through that, even if there's great content out there. I don't know of any certification in application security. I don't know of any, you know, school that does application security. So therefore, it's kind of a, you know, it's a weird thing where you have to let people know that it's a problem, but you need to find the solutions yourself. And the resources are out there, but there's nobody holding your hand. So I also think that's part of why we don't have that many application security engineers out there.
Do you think that over, like, in the next couple of years, though, that will change? I mean, it has to change because, like I said, we're just looking at society as a whole, things are changing. We can't continue on the way that we're going from a security standpoint.
Absolutely. I haven't seen new programs out there. I definitely hope so. I see a lot more content creator, but I don't see a formal change, right? Like I see a lot more content out there, content creators. It's definitely more popular. People are aware of these things, but I don't see it part of a program or as being something mandatory. So, you know, I don't know how well it's going to change. And what I'm hoping for is for us to have better tools, better framework to make the work easier for developers, for software developers, so that I'm repeating myself, where developers don't have to be security experts to do their job properly. And just by using the proper tools, that they have the reassurance that they're doing things right.
Listen, Nancy, maybe you have your next community move of like creating some curriculum around that.
Yeah, well, that's what we were doing with OWASP. That's what OWASP is all about, right? And that's what we're trying to do, but it's hard to do that globally and at scale and at the scale that we want to do. But community-wise, I think there is a huge community around it.
Right, because now that you mention it, if you're thinking from a global scale, different countries or different places are on a different level. Like, you know, I'm me being from America, you're in Canada, it's like we're only seeing part of the lens. Like, I don't know what they're doing over in Europe, if they're even ahead of us in regards to application security or not, but it's
They
like,
are
they really?
Yes, they are. And it's great because my you know, I know in the podcast you talk a lot about diversity, and what I found it's great in my team is that like the team is international, and I work mainly with European for Norway, from Norway, Spain, Cyprus, like everywhere, and that makes our team very diverse, and they're all expert in their fields. And so in Europe and even in South America, it's crazy how application security is well known and understood.
Let's dig into that a little bit, like the diversity of your team as well as how it's affecting some of your work. So I don't even know where to start here, because I guess I'm a little bit surprised that it's like Europe is ahead of us. Not to say that I didn't think they would be, but it's like, wow, like, why are we so behind? Like, why are we so behind? And we're usually the ones that are ahead.
Yeah, honestly, I do not have an answer to that. I was very surprised, as well as I was getting to know the community and knowing and realizing, you know, just by the name of the participant and saying, oh, you know, a lot of people tend to have a Latin name, and like, where are you from? From Argentina, from Spain, and that's when I realized, oh, there's huge communities coming from there. It's not something that I knew, or it's just by experience. I'm realizing that there are pockets, like even in Australia as well. There's a lot of people, and in India, it's not only security, it's anything tech. They're really strong and interested.
Interesting. So yeah, definitely if you're interested in application security, like look into some of those different areas and see what they're doing internationally, because it seems like they're a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
And Nancy, want to switch gears a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about your past, because I always like to see how people got into tech, and then also the roles they held before they got into their current role. So let's even start with schooling, because we were already talking about that. You were a full-out computer science major. Absolutely. And how did you know, or what inspired you to be a computer science major?
Yeah, that was my uncle. Absolutely. I need to give him 100% of the credit, because he was an engineer. He is an engineer. And I remember him solving everything with his computer, with technology, like even choosing, I remember this is a lottery ticket number. He created an application. He still did not win. But he created a program to pick the 6 numbers for like little 649 in Montreal, Quebec. So I remember that. And everything we did together, he solved with his computer. And that's how I realized that, you know, I love technology and I loved what it could do for us. So with my peers, I was always the one advanced, basically like knowing about technology. But then when I went to college, it was my first time having a computer. So the switch was very drastic, where, you know, because I went to an all-girl high school as well, where nobody really cared, or they didn't focus about technology and computers, where, you know, I feel like I was the expert there. And then going to college and realizing, oh, I know absolutely nothing. And in my class, there's a bunch of men or guys or young men who have been coding since they were 4 and had all sorts of computers at home. And I bought I bought my computer a week before you know, class started. And, you know, they're teaching me about like the browser, like really, really, really basic stuff, like things that, because you need to remember, now kids know about browsers and what to do and how to, you know, from birth almost. But at the time, you know, using Word, and I had to start, when I think back about it, the little I knew about computers when I started my computer science degree was was pretty easy, scary, and I'm impressed with myself continuing basically into computer science with the difference of levels that I had with my peers in those classes.
Yeah, and also, what did your peer group look like? Were you the only Black woman? Were there any other women in your journey?
Very few women, and only one, Virginia. I still forget.
Wow.
Virginia, I still remember her, and we graduated together, and we stick together. Like, just we turned out to be friends, and we're not in touch these days, but we were together for the whole time, and just asking each other and hustling together, and kind of like, did you get that? Because it's a weird thing where you realize, okay, I don't know as much as all these other people, but also realize that I have everything I need to succeed. I'm taking this class, and you're like, I get this. I can ace this. So you feel behind, but you also feel like you have the ability to succeed. So it was a really so it's fun to have each other to kind of push each other and move forward, and realize, no, we can do it. Don't give up. You can't give up, because we're the only two. So yeah.
That's awesome, though, that you had a support system. A lot of people don't, and especially if you're a Black woman in computer science at certain universities, it's like you are literally the only one.
Yes.
And you want to be the one that doesn't, like, you don't want to fail. Like, you want to achieve it because you're the only one. So it's good to have when you have support, and you're like, okay, we both can do this.
Yes. And I also have to give credit to my teachers. I feel like I was lucky. I don't think it's everybody's experience, but they were so encouraging. I remember there was a lot of women teachers as well in programming. Really? Yes. And remember doing a program in an algorithm and not being satisfied, because knowing in computers, when you program, I remember knowing what I wanted it to do, but not knowing how to get there, and just having the right thinking, but not having all the tools, and having a teacher saying, like, I see you, I see how you think, and I know you have everything to succeed, and I'll help you get there. And don't worry if you feel like you're blocked, I'll help you through there. And to have somebody else have this confidence in you is really empowering, and saying, like, okay, I have somebody to hold my hand. And again, thinking back about it, I don't think I understood that at the time. But now that I think back, I really had a great support system in my peers, and the teachers there.
Yes. Well, hindsight is always 2020. So I totally
absolutely.
So after college, we talked about your college career, you go through everything, you graduate. What was your first role out of college?
First role as a college is assistant for the RCMP, which is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is our Canadian FBI. And I'm in a role in the special investigations, where it's the first time they hire a computer science graduate, because they realized that all their material was analog. So everything was being converted into computers, and they're like, okay, we need our equipment to talk to each other, so we need somebody who understands networking. So it was a great way, like, we were discovering new things and trying new things, and there was no path written for me, but I was also given, like, they knew that there was no solution out there. So I had there was no pressure for me to do the job right, because we were all discovering this together. So it's a great environment to learn and to experiment with different technologies. And so that's where I started.
And so sometimes, though, when there's no path already laid out for you and you're all learning together, that can be a little bit scary too. So were there any lessons you learned during that part of your journey?
Just not to be scared, and that you can always figure it out. Like, the confidence that you need to have is not in, like, knowing the solution, but that you can get there, and that there's information out there, and that step by step, and breaking down the problem, and not thinking about the solution at the end, but saying, okay, what's the next step for me to be closer to my solution? And it helped me, like, looking through documentation, being problem solving, and not having it freed, not having a path freed me from finding my own and saying, it's not just me. I didn't have as much self-doubt and saying, oh, everybody's able to do it. We're all doing this for the first time. And again, a good support system that allowed me to experiment and be successful. So that helped.
And did you use any of the skills that you learned at that role for your current role today?
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing you need in tech, is to be able to solve problems and to realize that there's no solution written. The same solution doesn't work for everybody. And just understanding the problem, defining your problem clearly, and then taking it step by step to find your solution. So problem solving, being confident in your ability to solve problems is the number one thing that has been helpful for me in my career when I haven't felt the most, when the imposter syndrome knocks at the door. That's what I need to remind myself and say, okay, yeah, if anybody else can do it, I can do it too. And if there's a solution, if there's no solution now, we can, let's break it down and find help. And don't be worried, ask for help when you're blocked, but do your best and do your research and go further, push further, don't give up.
But real talk, like when you were in college, being like one of two women who graduated from computer science, I feel like yes, all imposter syndrome had to go out the window because, like, girl, you was already doing everything. like I feel like if you've done that, you're almost unstoppable. Like, what, you know what I mean? But I do understand that imposter syndrome pops up at the most random times.
Yes, it does. And also it's that you constantly, and I still feel that to this day, like, I feel like you're always behind. There's always new things to learn. And there's, the more you know, the more you realize you don't know a bunch of things. And I have a lot of self-doubt, which I actually find is an asset, because it makes me think through and double check things and makes me more thorough, but also gives me imposter syndrome. So there's pros and cons to it all. So no, to this day I have it. I just have to remind myself sometimes of what I've done in the past, and that I'm not here by accident. And I just need to think back of what I've done and to gain my confidence back based on my past achievements and what I was able to do in the past. That's how I go through it. And to this day, 20 years in, and I know not everybody's like that. And I wish I had a, better answer. Some people are talking and they're so confident and they know, and I'm that girl and I can do that. This is not my story. Every day, I'm in a room and I'm wondering, okay, do I belong here? And why am I here? And I have to think back and get that confidence back. And it does get easier. I don't want to discourage anybody. It does get easier, but you do get tools to remember who you are and what you can do.
Yes. And it's a process, right? Like everything, it's a process. Yeah. Some people wake up overnight and they're like, you know what? I don't have it anymore. I'm that girl. And that's what I do. And sometimes it's like, we're going to take it hour by hour because I don't know what I'm doing right now, but I'm here. Yes.
No, I'm glad you bring that up, because we do have moments where you're like, I'm unstoppable. Yes, I am great. I am that girl. Yes, I do have moments like that. And then, the year after. And again, I talk about network and being surrounded by great people, I think is important, because that's what I think my friends do and my network does, is just remind me, like, no, you can't be talking that way because you did this and you did that and you were able to do this. So having people around you to remind you, why you're here is helpful. Definitely helpful. Yes. So find your tribe, find your crew.
Yes, find your hype crew.
Yes.
And Nancy, also, besides doing the system administrator role, you did another role where you were an IT security analyst too, right?
Absolutely. That's when, when I worked for the RCMP, the Canadian FBI, it was so random. Like, it was great, exciting work, but I always felt like if I lose that job, or if I want to move on from that job, who will hire me? It's so specific to like special investigation. So I kind of got worried and ambitious at the same time and said, I need to move on and get a skill that, makes me more marketable. And turns out that, without even knowing, I did a lot of security working for the police because we needed to protect the data. I didn't call it security, but then the more I learned about it, I realized, I'm basically a security expert. And that's when I made my move into being a security analyst, because I realized I already had that thought process, that thinking of securing everything that I did to work in a secure manner and have those, confidentiality, integrity, availability of my system was always top of mind, whatever I did. So that's when I switched into that GRC, the governance and risk management role, which was a less technical role. It's more an assessment and advising role. But with the technical background that I had that ability to have technical conversation and some credibility with the people I worked with. So that was a great way to transition into cybersecurity, which wasn't called that way. It was information security at the time. So cybersecurity, I think in the last 5 years, it's been more of the common word, but before that, it was information security.
So let's unpack that a little bit, and let's start with your itch to not be basically put into a box with your first role. So was there any aha moment, or were you just like, look, I mean, I put in some time here, but I am like, I gotta go?
Yes, well, I was, I think 7 years in, and then I'm like, this is fun and all, but like, how do I move on? How do I get promoted? And yes, and I wasn't thinking, I was having so much fun. It was so great that I wasn't thinking about that. But at some point, I was like, okay, so let's think career. And is that going to be, how am I going to move on from here? And how can I create a resume with my skill set? Because it's not things that people would want. Like the technologies I was working with, nobody was working with that or with the same intent. Like now that I think about it, it was completely false that I couldn't find a job, because just the way I was thinking and the creativity and the problem solving skills that I acquired doing that job, I could do a lot of different things. But that's what, that was my belief. I'm like, nobody's gonna, I know the technology I'm working with are too specific. Nobody will want to hire me. And so I guess that's why I said I was kind of being ambitious and saying, I want my career to grow. And what can I do? How can I switch in a way that will make me really, really marketable?
And when you actually like followed that ambition and you start looking for roles, I just want to talk through that process of like, what did you do in order to find your new role? Were you networking a lot? Were you just applying for, I don't want to say any and every job, but were you applying for a lot of roles that you were seeing? What was your process?
Yes, I was so focused. I was applying to everything, but I tried to be specific about security because when I figured out that, because I was looking at all the roles I was in the government employee at the time, and I was looking at all the roles and I say, I feel like I have this skill. So I figured out early that security was my next step. And then I kept applying, but there was no follow-up. I didn't get a rejection, but nothing was happening. And then contacted HR and said, okay, I'm applying. I feel like I'm qualified to do this job. What am I doing wrong? And she kind of coached me into building my resume in a way that's, because in the Canadian government, there's a very specific format to make your resume. So based on the requirement, you need to make sure that you use the same word so that somebody who's reading that resume is not necessarily in IT. So if they don't see the word from the requirement in your CV, then, if you say it in a different way that they don't understand, they don't make the connection, and then they don't know. And I also believe it was about people knowing your name, because as soon as I made that call, suddenly my summary was like, because yes, I changed a few things in my resume, but it didn't explain the silence, the fact that nobody was calling back. And suddenly, like, after that call to HR and saying, hey, I want to get promoted. I feel I'm qualified. Suddenly my resume was getting picked up. I was getting called for interviews and got promoted in the next 2 months, I think. So it's advocating for yourself. That's also a message for anybody in their career, and realizing that's when I also realized, like, nobody is going to, no, sometimes you'll meet this unicorn mentor who will push you and send your name, and just like the job I got right now, when I met Sasha and she gave my name and they contacted me, that was great. But that's not the norm. You kind of have to find the opportunities and push for them even before you're ready. Just believe in your ability to let them say no. That's something I say a lot. Let them say no. Because I used to say, look at position and say, oh, this is too hard, or I don't have everything that they want, so therefore it doesn't work. So yeah.
I like that philosophy though, like let them say no.
Yes.
Because a lot of times we take ourselves out of the running before anything even has happened.
Absolutely. And that's not the way to move forward. You'll see how doors open up once you let them assess and don't close the door for yourself.
Right. And also I wanted to touch on the advocating for yourself part. It is so crazy to me that they just went radio silence, and this is like your current place of employment, but they didn't want to even like tell you like, hey, we chose someone else or we're going with other candidates. Just a radio silence until you put yourself out there. So note to self, people, put yourself out there. And the follow-up, because a lot of times people are like, I don't believe in the follow-up. No, the follow-up is probably one of the most important things that you can do. I don't care if you follow up tomorrow, the day after, in a month, follow up.
Yeah. And understand, and it was also a government environment, and just letting them know, hey, I'm paying attention to this. What is going on, right? Sometimes it's, if nobody's talking, if nobody's paying attention, I just don't have to say anything and thing continues. But when you're telling people, I'm here, I'm intentional, I'm paying attention, I'm looking at the process, suddenly people like kind of sit straight up and kind of do things right and need to provide answers. And it was I became a bit difficult to ignore at that point. Like they had to give me answers. It's like, why? I don't mind a no, but why was there a no if I met the requirement? And I'm internal to the government, right? Like it's not somebody from elsewhere. So you have a resource within the organization. Why are you not using it? And when they didn't have answers, things started moving. So
and you know what? I highly approve of, bringing attention to yourself in that way, because I think a lot of times we kind of sit back and like let things ride. No, bring attention. What's the worst that's going to happen? Exactly.
Yeah. There's no, I feel, and especially like when you're starting your career, I find that people want to help most of the time, right? Like I feel like that the hardest as a, Black woman in tech, like it got harder when I got promoted, when I started getting management position, because earlier in the career, I found a lot of people are kind of like, yeah, or diversity is important, or they're surprised that there was a Black woman in tech that can actually do her job, and they're impressed, which that's funny. Like, I feel like as a young, student, I was flattered by it, but, maybe like 3-4 years into it, I'm like, how are you impressed with this? Like, this is my career. I've been doing this for like, if you don't expect that from me, what are you expecting exactly? Right? Like what used to be a compliment became an insult. And management was more difficult because, being a junior as a Black person in tech is more common, but then being the manager and giving a direction and having to be listened to and having this authority can be challenging.
What was your experience as a manager? Do you have like any tips or advice for anyone who's listening to the episode if they are a woman or a Black man in tech, but they're a manager for the first time? Any advice for them?
I'll I'll skip that one because no, it was such a hard and traumatic experience for me that I became an individual contributor and stayed that way and avoided management position to this day. So
Listen,
yes,
there's nothing wrong with that. And I think more people need to talk about that, because I think, well, I don't now, with the way that the workforce is going, I don't think people aspire to be a manager as much as they used to. But I'm hearing more from people now of like, they love being an individual contributor, and that's all they want to be. Like,
yes,
and that's okay.
yes.
That's the thing that needs to be said, is it's okay to want, that's your aspiration. Don't let anybody talk you into anything different.
Yeah, that's been my path, and I've been happy in it. So yeah, but also like not everybody, and understanding that's what you said, like not everybody has the personality to be a manager, or like, so I did some management training as well and felt like, oh, but I don't want to do that. Like, it's like about learning about your team and their personality type and kind of adapting, and it just felt so, I'm like, when do I get to do what I like? When do I get to do my job? And I feel like if that's your reaction to management, because I saw people that were meant for management being very excited about things. So that was a sign to me that these people were meant for management, and maybe that wasn't for me. That doesn't mean that I can't, manage projects, that I can't manage a team, but like the management, you wanted me to do the management of people was something I stayed away from.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And Nancy, we've talked a little bit about your current role, your career, and other roles in tech. I do want to wrap up today's conversation just talking about application security topics and any advice that you would have for my listeners. So one question I have is, we talked about people securing their code and having security for that. What advice or what resources do you have in regards for people who are looking to secure their code?
I'll go back to OWASP. I know I'm repeating myself, but it is really the foundation of it all. Well, you'll find, and the resources are free. And from there, you'll get to know other things, but you'll even see if you take a class online, you take a class in university, they will be taking OWASP resources to teach you. So I'm not exaggerating by saying that OWASP is what you should follow and where you should go first. And join your local chapter. If you don't want to join the local chapter, find the resources online on the OWASP Top 10. I think that's the number one project to look at to understand why application is so important and what you can do about it, because it talks about the vulnerabilities, but it also tells you about how to fix them. So it's definitely something I think you should start with.
Okay. And then if we're looking towards the future, obviously there's a lot of security threats. Like I said, things are happening every day, and things we probably don't even know about. From your perspective of application security, what does the future look like? Do you think that the number of threats will continue to increase? What do those threats look like? Give me some of your insights there.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's working with a bunch of researchers who their job is 100% all the time finding new vulnerabilities. I find from the attacker side and defender side, people are looking for vulnerabilities because it's very lucrative. So it's just going to be, and all software have vulnerabilities. There's no software without vulnerabilities. It's, maybe we haven't found them yet, but we will. The more we create, the more flaws there will be. So that's why I'm betting more on better frameworks, better processes, better tools to make sure that we're doing things securely, but also education and just awareness of what is vulnerable and what you can do as a coder, as a software engineer, to make what kind of practices you can put in place to make sure that you're building secure software.
Awesome. And also, just from an application security standpoint in general, I feel like it's not a topic that it's kind of thrown under cybersecurity. But what I want to ask you is, from the standpoint of it being like standalone, because it really is a big topic, what do you think the listeners need to know about application security? I'll start with, it's not as scary as everyone makes it out to be. It seems like it's a pretty reasonable topic that you can easily start researching.
Yes, it's definitely something to start researching, but also I think it's awareness. It's understanding that your software, because I feel like for many years, a lot of software developers did not understand that their software was vulnerable. So once you're aware, because software developers are smart, some of the smartest people, like I do respect them. If they're not doing their work insecurely because they want to, sometimes they're not aware that this is part of the quality of their code. And once you show a software developer that their code is vulnerable, they want to fix it. They're very proud. They be very proud because that's what they created.
Yeah.
So it's just being aware of what's possible and how and there's a type of people out there that are trying to build to use your software, what you create, in a way that was not intended to be used, and that's making the rest of the environment or the ecosystem a bit insecure. So staying aware, making sure that you have the best practices and the processes in place to do your job as securely as possible, and to do your best, and also assess the risk and understanding what is important to me and what is important to me and what am I trying to protect? What is really important for me? Am I collecting, customer data? Am I collecting personal information? You don't have to secure everything, but understanding what's the most important to me, where am I the most vulnerable, and let's focus on that first.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Nancy. And to end today's conversation, I always open the floor for my guests if they have any additional advice or instructions that they want to give the listeners. Now's your turn.
Well, on a security perspective, I just want to tell people, like, whenever they're building, or if they're a software developer or whatever they do in tech, they don't have to be a security specialist to do security. There's a saying in our field, like, security is everybody's job. And what we mean by that is that if you're part of the chain of the cycle, you can help make the ecosystem more secure. So when you're building something, always look up, how can I do this securely? Or is there any vulnerability in what I'm doing? And I feel like being a builder and having security practices are, it's a superpower. And you don't have to be a security specialist to do security.
Well, Nancy, it has been great having you on the pod for today. Also,
thank you for having me.
Who want to follow you, where can they find you on social media and all that good stuff?
Yeah, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, to find my name. Probably in your show note, you'll have my last name, Nancy Gariche, and just look me up. And if you have questions, I can direct you. I'm happy to answer emails and questions. Like I said, I don't have my personal brand per se, but I'm always happy to help somebody who would want to know more about application security or even cybersecurity in general, how to get started.
Awesome. Again, Nancy, so great to have you on the podcast. Glad you could drop some knowledge on application security, because we all need to know what's going on there. And again, appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been happy to catch up with you as well,